good cold windy day. The Northern Lights daddy. Hey, here it is. The world famous Alta Museum, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which explains the ancient rock carvings and I guess the ancient people who somehow lived in these harsh environments so long ago. We are now way up here on top of the world. The main feature is outside, but inside, the Alta Museum has genuinely fascinating displays about the history of this part of the Finnmark region, both ancient and modern, including one of mankind's greatest achievements of the 19th century. So back in 1816, and lasting until 1855, there was a big survey, huge survey involving multiple countries to measure exactly the Earth and the shape of the Earth, because Isaac Newton thought that it was not a perfect sphere, and it isn't. So it involved basically many people in many countries and several decades of people building little cairns, little piles of rocks or whatever, and then kind of measuring the distance between them, also measuring the height of them, and then using a bunch of triangles to figure out the exact length of one of the sides, stretching from way up here in Norway, through Finland, all down there, through Estonia, present day, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, through Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, and then far southern Ukraine. All of these points were measured to get what turned out to be an extremely accurate measurement of meridian lines and stuff. Through the Geodetic Arc, like the whole thing together is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Hey, if you saw my video about seeing the bald Mark Twain outside the Northern Lights Cathedral, it's this guy. And he is Christian Birkeland. He was an early Norwegian researcher. He thought that the Aurora was caused by the sun's rays entering the magnetic field of the Earth. And Europe's top scientists said no. But he came here to research it, and it turns out he was correct. So, the Northern Lights daddy. I think I like Finland's idea better. In Finland, people thought the flickering lights were caused by large foxes running across the tundra and beating their furry tails on the mountainsides. So the Finnish word for the auroras is therefore revontulet, fire foxes. A bit more poetic. And of course, this is about the animals of northern Norway. Kind of tough and kind of a dark, angular little museum license to find a good place for a selfie. What's that? Well, I'll be there as a selfie. All right. So the actual rock art is outside, about a kilometer walk away, something like that. Just getting to the rock art is an adventure. Hey, here we have our first rock carving. A reindeer and apparently moose and fish and all kinds of things. Only discovered in 1973. Okay, this is the most famous view of the Alta rock carvings. The painting was done in the 1970s to make them more visible. And that stopped in 2010, and now they are in the process of removing the paint because they want it to be more natural. But it does make it nice to see. So it's kind of there's a good point and a bad point to it. These are from 6,000 and 7,000 years ago, and they're mostly elk and reindeer and people and various hunts and things like that. Here's a herd of reindeer, and over here, hunting reindeer from boats. Imagine people 6,000 and 7,000 years ago living here. Imagine people now living here. The rock carvings are in two areas, linked by another of northern Norway's main attractions, yet another unbelievable walk along a fjord. Now, going to the other part of the rock carvings on the east side of the bay, which have not been painted red. I am here in the part of the rock carvings that haven't been painted red, and you can indeed see them, even without the paint. And it is kind of more natural and more of a simple, beautiful aesthetic to see them like this. I'm not gonna lie, some of these are hard to see. I guess it depends on the lighting. But if you look at this one here, you see this. And if you look in the booklet, it looks like this. And it says, in the center of the panel, there are two powerfully built men facing each other. They are wearing pointed headgear and holding elk head staves. Between them runs a man with a long spear, and in front of him lies a bull elk, beside which there is a hunter aiming at another elk with his bow and arrow. Perhaps this depicts rituals performed to ensure good hunting. These boat carvings, if you can see them, were done 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, way before the Vikings, but they kind of remind me of Viking ships. I guess a ship is a ship. So these carvings in this area were about 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. And in those days, you didn't have to worry about being monitored by security cameras. This red rock right here has got iron in it, that's why it's red. And back when it was carved, 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, something like that, it was actually lower. Land has risen since then, so the bottom part does not have carvings on it because it was underwater then, and now it's risen up and easier to see now. Although from this distance, it is hard to make out any figures, but I'm told they're there. Good cold windy day looking into Altafjord. I don't know if this is the Norwegian Sea or the Barents Sea, but they kind of start meeting around here, I think. One more thing they have here. The sticks mark the edges of the floors where some very ancient houses were. Something like this, maybe. Imagine living in that. Here's a rock art of a circle with 4 people inside. So it's probably a family living inside something, one of these types of things. Imagine living on this ridge, on this kind of bluff over the water here in the Arctic 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Those were some tough people. And they have their own cafe. And I've got some ramen noodles and some banana pineapple juice, whose label only has Spanish, Greek, and Norwegian on it. How exotic. One final thing. If you're linguistically minded, I've got some information for you. I just asked the lady that works here about the word that I've seen in the guidebook here. This area is called Hjemmeluft. That's how it's spelled. H-J-E, blah, 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 blah. But I asked her how to say it. She said Hjemmeluft. And I said, Hjemmeluft? She said, yeah, the H is silent and the E, the first E, up in this part of Norway is aft. She said back down south they would probably say Hjemmeluft. But the H is silent anyway. So that's all I got for you today from the Alta Museum. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one as the adventure keeps continuing.